Thank you for joining, especially at the beginning of a long weekend, which I'm sure a very needed long weekend for all of us. But I hope this feels like a moment of pause and centering, something to take with you, not just for the weekend, but for life. So this is Staying Balanced at Home. I am a mental health counselor, board certified dance movement therapist, and registered yoga teacher. For Cornell Corporate Extension, I am a health and wellness educator and very excited to be here this evening. So throughout the presentation, I invite you to participate and engage in the questions, whatever you feel is best for you, whether that be unmuting, and I'll give those prompts to unmute as we go through it, or answer in the chat box. Okay. So for our agenda today, we're going to be talking about health for the whole self. We're going to be discussing your body as your home, about building sustainable habits, health and wellness myths, and resources. So if you've been with me in my other presentations, you know I love quotes, and I thought this quote was very fitting for today. It says, "Your body is your home. If you don't take care of it, where are you going to live?" By Anonymous. Has anyone here heard this quote before? We can give a raise of the hand or a thumbs up in the chat. First time. This was one of those where you feel it, right? And it was like life-changing for me when I heard it. And I said, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I gotta recenter myself and figure this out, because it is so true. And I think especially now, as we think we're stuck at home, well, we also have our body still, right? And that's an essential home to take care of. Love that, yes. So in our discussion of health and wellness for the whole self, I've taken the principles of my work in dance movement therapy and divided it so we can conceptualize it as mind, body, and soul for the whole self. Does anyone have any other definitions of how they would describe wellness for the whole self? And there's no wrong or right. Centered? Yeah. I know when I feel my whole self, I feel like things are just flowing. I'm not tied too much to the past, not tied too much to the future. Things will come up, but I just kind of go with it. All-encompassing, balanced, really nice. Yes. And please feel free to keep offering in the chat as we go through this. So in thinking about wellness for the whole self, and all those words we use, centered, all-encompassing, balanced, and we think about wellness of the mind, what are some ways that we can take care of our mind, especially now during quarantine? And as we're actually, some of us are shifting, right, back into new schedules. Meditate, taking breaks from technology and screen time. Yes, techniques to clear the mind. So in one of my other presentations, we discussed the 20-20-20 rule. I'll type down those numbers here for you. So the rule is that for every 20 minutes of screen time, you look 20 feet away for 20 seconds, and then you can go back to your screen time. And of course, sometimes it's hard to follow those exact rules depending on what your work is, but I thought it was a really nice way to conceptualize being able to take those breaks. Screen time is definitely wearing on us. What are some ways we can take care of our body? Exercise, yep. And I would even stretch that to movement, right? Exercise is fantastic. I love it. And if there's some days where that feels like too much, taking time to breathe, whether that be to meditate, to maybe shift your eyes to something else, to just move around the house in a different way, maybe throw a dance party by yourself. That can be really, really filling as well. Yes, yoga and diet. Those are great ways to take care of your body and your mind, really. You know, we talk about the mind and body being connected. And with that, I want to offer the soul as well. So soul can be whatever you conceptualize it to be. It's not necessarily attached to any kind of dogma or religion. How are some ways that you take care of your soul? Prayer. Doing something creative. I was about to say art. Wonderful. So I invite everyone to either think for yourself or offer in the chat one thing you're going to do this long weekend for your mind, for your body, and your soul. Ooh, someone just said helping others in need. Yes, that is very, very soul-filling. So I know for myself, for my mind, I'm going to get away from the screen as much as I can this long weekend. For my body, I'm going to move around a lot. I'm going to play with my dog and give him a chance to move as well. And for my soul, I'm going to create some art. Read, walk, and music. Nice. Some gardening. Oof, there's something about getting yourself close to the earth that is quite literally grounding, right? Wash the dog. I love that. Always a good activity. Wonderful. Let's keep on offering as we go through. It'll all keep tying together, so answers are always relevant. So as we make these goals for ourselves, I've heard about a lot of different challenges and things to do during quarantine, and then everyone's different, right? I know some people are like, I don't have enough to do. I need to figure out what to do now that I have to be at home. And there's the other end, right, where we're so overwhelmed, we don't even know where to fit anything else in our schedule. So when we're making these goals for ourselves for this weekend, for our mind, body, and soul, ensuring that they're SMART goals. So that means they are specific, they are measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, right? So if I have never trained for a triathlon before and I plan on doing one in a month, that doesn't sound very attainable and not very well timed, right? Maybe if I said 6 months, I'd be okay. But we need to make sure that we're making those successful goals for ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to set ourselves up for a loss. And then a lot of times we're hard on ourselves, and we don't want that, right? Small steps towards success are key. So someone like to offer an example of a SMART goal for this weekend, or it could be something over the next couple of weeks. Just making sure that it meets that criteria of specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. Walk for 30 minutes, 5 times a week. Awesome, right? Maybe if this person would have pushed their goal to 45 minutes 5 times a week, they wouldn't have made it, and then they would have been, given up. That happens a lot, right? But if you set it into a really attainable amount, like 30 minutes, and maybe it's once a week or 5 times a week, as this person suggested, then we are being more realistic, and then we're able to climb the ladder steadily, right? Versus just trying to jump to the top every time. That's exhausting. Any other SMART goals to offer for anyone to take on or that you want to commit to right now? And I want to also add, a goal can very much be to rest, to really allow time for maybe resting, 30 minutes 5 times a week. If you're someone who's maybe overactive, that can be really essential too for mind, body, and soul. Yes, I think we're in a stage where it's probably pre-quarantine as well, productivity, 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 right? We hear that word. And then there's an unfortunate attachment of worth to that. And that is just simply not true, right? You yourself are enough. Everyone is doing what they can right now, and that is enough, okay? So with that, we're gonna go into the mind-body connection and discussing the balancing of relationships. I know someone said the word balancing before, and I want us to use that specifically as we relate to the self, to others, and the environment. So what does it mean to have a relationship with yourself? To pamper yourself, yep. To understand what you need. Oof, that's a big one, right? Anyone ever feel like a kid where you're like scrambling to try and do something to soothe yourself and self-regulate, and you can't figure out what it is, right? That's often like how a baby feels or a child feels when they don't know what they need and they can't verbalize it. So as adults, we get stuck like that too. And that can be really, really frustrating. But once we understand it, to actually give ourselves that, it's tough, okay? The other is balancing relationships with others. So how do we balance relationship with others in a stage where we are socially isolating and maybe we are also living and with the same people all day, every day? And everyone's situation is different. So I definitely want your offering of what it means to balance a relationship with an other. It's challenging. Yes, it really is. It can be hard to create those boundaries in that limit setting. Which before we had boundaries like, oh, we leave for work and then we come home, or we leave for school, or someone else leaves at least. Or if we live alone, we're used to having that access to socialization just by being in our other daily environments. So it's an adjustment period that we're in, and I would be very gentle with yourself about it. The other is balancing relationships with the environment. So when I talk about environment, I don't just mean the outside world, but in general, the environment that we live in, right? So besides nature, what are other examples of our environment? My bedroom, right? So give a raise of hands of whose morning commute has changed, right? Now when I go to the office, it's going from my bedroom to the living room. And although that feels simple, right, I think it's really important that we take action as if, and we are, and we're still going to work for those of us who are fortunate enough to have maintained work throughout this quarantine, that we embody that, right? It's one thing to think it, it's another thing to embody it. That's really the mind-body connection. And then how do we set that space up for success, right? Is that lighting right for you? Is the lighting exhausting you in addition to the screen time? Is there smells there that maybe actually could help you, right? We know that some smells wake us up. There's others that relax us. So doing those little things for ourselves add up, as well as if we don't do those little things for ourselves, that adds up in a different direction. Okay. Which goes into setting ourselves up for success. And aside from setting ourselves up for success, how do we maintain that success? Who's had struggles with maintaining a goal for themselves? I know I have a lot, right? It's really hard. A lot of us get really amped up and we set this amazing goal for ourselves. We're like, oh my God, this is it. This is my moment. And then 3 days later, we can't even remember the last time we did the goal, right? Yes, being pulled in too many directions, it's definitely a feeling, and there's too many hats, right? And the constant switching of them. So tracking our habits can be a really, really effective way in order to maintain them, right? You name them and then you maintain them, and then you establish that consistency. It takes a long time. There's multiple studies about how many days it really takes. And I think aside from it knowing it takes well more than 30 days, it also depends on each person. So again, I think the biggest thing you can do for yourself is to be really non-judgmental in the process and stay curious about how you're setting yourself up for success, tracking your habits, and the consistency around it. Okay? So here's 2 words, autopilot and presence. What does autopilot mean? Run, not thinking too much. Yep. Going and going without having to think. Yes. It's a very body forward thing. It's so automatic. Like how many of us just walk downstairs, turn on the coffee, and then we go do something else, and then we have the next step, and before you know it, we're already in our morning meeting, right? We're not really thinking about it. Our body's responding before our mind is. Okay? And there's some impulsivity to that too, because the body is taking over control. Multitasking. So a fun fact about multitasking, we can't do it. It's not possible. It's like having multiple tabs open in your screen, but you're only looking at one at a time, and you're just shifting really fast. But we cannot multitask, okay? Which is, I think, good. Not multitasking leads us to presence. So what does it mean to be present? To focus, yep. I know to be able to focus on one thing at a time is when I know I feel present. To also not be thinking so far ahead that I dysregulate myself or stuck too far behind that I'm not in the present, right? So I always describe autopilot like being in the car. And there are 5 signs we've identified that show you're on autopilot. If you're always on, so again, going and going without having to think. You feel restless when you're off, so you've gone from 100 to 0, and then you're like, nope, I need to be at 100 again, right? Who feels like this all day? I know I've felt like that many, many times. And it's kind of a signal I listen to now and say, whoa, I've got to reel it in, right? Because we can't be like this. We're humans. We need our presence and our rest. Who knows what FOMO and JOMO mean? It's a great one if you have teenagers. So FOMO is fear of missing out and joy of missing out. Yeah. So I think this is especially interesting now during quarantine because we have people who the fear of missing out is thinking like, oh, I'm missing the social activity and I'm always upset because I want to be at all the social activities at once, right? The joy of missing out is I am fine sitting at home watching a movie and just being by myself. That's the joy of missing out. So you might see a switch in what's happening with quarantine, and I don't think either of them are wrong or right. I think it's just about what your preferences are and the lack of control a lot of us feel right now in being able to access what our preferences are. Another sign of autopilot is constantly people pleasing. And your basic survival needs feel out of reach. So sometimes these go hand in hand, right? We're helping people so much, we're constantly focused on others. Sometimes we do that because it's hard to focus on ourselves. And sometimes we do it so much that we forget to eat for 3 hours. We have been holding and waiting to go to the bathroom for way too long. We haven't attended to our own basic needs. Drinking water. Yeah, moms are big people pleasers, parents, caregivers, you know? It's a natural hat a lot of us wear. And there's so many strengths to it, but we can only go so far, right? We had our second week of caregiver wellness last week, and we talked about filling your cup, but that cup's going to drain out eventually. So we need to fill it with presence and art and mind, body, and soul, all that good stuff we talked about earlier. So tools for present include art, journaling, moving, all these things. And of course, this is my bias as an expressive therapist. You're mirroring what you feel. Language is not always the best tool for us to really get into our feels, okay? So something that is in front of us, like a mirror, but a mirror that is artistic or words or movement, can be really, really powerful to remind us and ground us. Calling a loved one. Doing one thing at a time. This is a challenge for everybody this weekend, including myself. Something that you usually multitask in, maybe it's eating, for example. And if we're eating like this with like our phone, right? We're not really being mindful and doing one thing at a time. So I challenge you to just put it down, take 20 to 30 minutes, however long it takes you, and just eat. You might actually feel a rush of confusion in your body because every new experience in the body, whether it's good or bad, is registered as confusion. But I invite you to begin processing the good in that, and that you absolutely deserve to take time just to eat a meal, just for yourself. It's so nourishing on a nutrition level and a psychological level. Okay. So I will add these in the chat as links, but these are examples of habit trackers that I really like. I think they're simple. You can make your own. There's no right or wrong to this. It's just what works for you. So those are on the left. And I also included a financial tracker because we know financial health is always important. And I think especially now, right? Maybe everyone's anxiety about this has gone way up, and that's really legit and valid. On the right, I've added a resource that we use in expressive therapies to describe everything that we've been talking about today. So it comes from the principle that we, on a very basic level, are processing things kinesthetically and sensory-wise, okay? So when we're babies, how do we communicate? We don't use words. We use sounds. Maybe we'll be able to draw something, or like, I'm doing this as if it was like finger painting or like sponging something, and we move. And those senses don't get lost when we're adults. You're seeing now I'm talking a lot with my hands. This has always been a habit of mine. But it is a way I communicate. And we all have that within us. We just kind of push it down because our cognitive symbolic, so that third up tier, is taking over. We have other things like words and symbols to be able to replace those movements and sounds. The very middle level, the perceptual affective level, is this in-between creative self where we're processing like art and music and feelings, right? When all those are flowing really well, we're taking care of mind, body, and soul, we can be our most creative selves. And creative means whatever it means for you. We're producing, basically. And when we feel a block in our minds and we're like, oh, I just can't, and my brain is foggy, right? I've been on autopilot for so long, or my wires are crossed right now. That's actually when you really need the lower levels. You need movement, and you need rest, and you need art, and something not so cognitive to be able to reset. And please feel free to write questions as we go along. I'll definitely pause to answer them because I know it's a lot of information that I definitely want to be able to send you away with some good resources for the weekend. So in that, we have our external resources and our internal resources. And I want us to be able to do a meditation together. So meditation can be incredibly simple. And I invite you to find a comfortable seat. If you're sitting, if you're standing, you can absolutely stay standing for this. And maybe just put your hands on something in front of you to feel some more grounding, like a table or a counter. But I ask to definitely have the feet on the floor because we want to literally feel grounded. Again, embodying what we say and what we feel. And I want us to take a big, deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. And at the next inhale, I invite you to close your eyes or softly gaze in front of you, whatever feels most safe to you. Inhale again through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. With the next inhale, think of something that you need to let go of this weekend. And as we inhale again, think of it and let it go. Maybe physically pick it up in front of you and place it next to you. Inhale again, shoulders rolled back and down. Exhale into the back, down the spine. Continuing to breathe, inhaling through the nose. At the exhale, filling your pelvis with breath. Feeling that grounding, warm breath, centering you closer, closer to yourself. At the next inhale through the nose, breath moves up towards the chest, filling the heart, opening heart center. Nice, loud, audible breaths. And at the next inhale, I invite you to make sure the exhale is longer than the inhale. Continuing to keep your eyes closed, soft gaze towards the ground. 2 more at your own pace. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Continuing to breathe at the inhale and exhale. Rolling the shoulders back and down again, wiggling your toes on the ground. Your hands, if they're holding something in front of you, keeping chest forward, and centering yourself into the rest of our presentation. Okay. So now we've just been in our bodies. I know we're almost out of time. So I want to be mindful of that as we go into the weekend. But I definitely want to go through these myths because I think we hear a lot about how powerful breath is. You might have heard like the healing powers of breath, but there's some true science behind that. It's that we're engaging with the inhale, our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response, and at the exhale, our parasympathetic nervous system, so our calming response. Both run simultaneously in the body, but when there's stress, our sympathetic gets bumped up and our parasympathetic gets bumped down. But when we control the breath, we're learning how to do both together. And again, we are learning how to control it again versus the external control of society, the world, work, others, whatever that may be. So to continue demystifying health and wellness, catching up on sleep on the weekend. True or false? False. Right. You cannot catch up on sleep on the weekend. It's not a thing. You absolutely need the sleep you need throughout the week and the weekend. There is no catching up on it. So we're in quarantine. Now is the perfect time to complete X, Y, and Z goal. Is this true or is this false? False. True and false. Ooh, what a winner. It is both true and false. It's completely dependent on who you are and your needs, right? This is not something that is just black and white answer. I think there are goals that are realistic during quarantine, and there's some that you're just not being fair to yourself. So it's really what's best for you. What about the thought of, oh, I can burn that off later? In regards to food, right? So we eat something thinking, oh, I can just burn it off later. Yeah, nope. Which I definitely encourage you to go to a more nutrition-based workshop for this, but there's just certain foods that will digest differently and be processed differently that exercise won't affect maybe in the way that we assume it does, or maybe in the way that sometimes is advertised it does. So definitely look for supportive resources that are based in some really valid science. So for our closing exercise, I want us to respond in the chat to this poem. So I will verbalize an example of one, and this will also be included in the resources. It's a journaling exercise that I think helps connect the body work that we did before with breath to the cognitive sense of self. So it's titled, You Are Essential. I will say that I am happy. I wonder when this will be over. I understand it's going to take some time. I hope for a beautiful sunny weekend. I feel peace. I am human. Someone says, I am drained. I hope I recharge this long weekend. Yes. Recharging is necessary. And I don't think we need to give positive replies. I think the idea is to be real. I think a week ago I would have answered very differently. So it's really, again, one of those things that it's not black and white. It is so moment by moment for every single person. Okay. So our closing thoughts, comments and questions, and resources. So I apologize, I went a little fast, but someone says, I am tired and I wonder when my body won't hurt. That's powerful. Because there is so much when our body hurts that takes over the mind as well. It's so hard to disconnect them. So in our resources, this first resources that I've added, it's possibly my favorite because there is a plethora of resources within it. There's financial, there's physical, such as free movement and workout videos online or from different companies that are still providing those during quarantine. There is also some helplines and national hotlines for mental health, as well as the option to call your local resources. There is a lot of really great options with telehealth right now. And depending on your insurance, there's even some insurances that aren't doing copays to support during quarantine. There's also apps like the Last Year, Headspace, Calm, and Virtual Hope Box. So for anyone who is who likes apps, those are some great options. And I'm going to leave this on for another minute for any final questions, comments. You know, it was refreshing to be here. It's great to see people accessing wellness from all the different tiers. Yeah, and I definitely hope this felt like a different kind of meeting for everyone. So again, I'm going to write my email so I know it's all the way at the top of the chat. One last time. If you have any questions to follow up or resources that weren't received, yes, thank you for being here today. Wonderful. Noted. I will follow up with these resources for you.